Peter Pan has become a beloved children's fairy tale.
Over there, Tink. And it's Dan. Is it there? Must be here somewhere. Tink! Shh!
But many of us are still only familiar with the Disney version of the story of Peter Pan, and like many fairy tales, folk tales, and myths, Peter Pan also has a dark and mysterious side. The first appearance of Peter Pan in the literary world did not begin with the famous story that many readers are familiar with. The underlying tone of darkness in Peter Pan was not purely a product of Barrie's imagination. It was informed by events from real life. Barrie's early years were characterized by tragedy, as he lost an older brother and 2 infant brothers. Later, as an adult, Barrie befriended the Davies family, and the seeds for Peter Pan were planted. Using his late siblings and the Davies boys as inspiration, J.M. Barrie wrote The Little White Bird, a novel about an adult who befriends a little kid and becomes a father figure in his life. The young man in the narrative is named David, and James is still wondering about his lost sibling more than 30 years later. The Little White Bird tells the story of how children came to be. According to the story, children start out as birds in Kensington Gardens. When these birds lose their wings, they become human children that are destined to grow up. This initial transfer of Peter Pan shows a child who escapes his human existence by flying out the window. The story begins with a magical, yet rather sinister character who would grow to represent both the positives and evils of everlasting childhood. As it turns out, endless childhood isn't as perfect as it might seem. When it comes to Peter Pan and his life in Neverland, never growing up can be harmful, not only for him, but also for everyone around him. Instead of the playful but ultimately good-hearted young people we know from Disney's popular portrayal of the character, J.M. Barrie's story shows Peter Pan as a darkly supernatural being with an odd fixation on power. In addition to focusing on all the benefits of never growing up, Peter Pan has a specific hatred for anyone who shows signs of growing up, even slightly. Peter Pan does not simply fight pirates, he kills them without hesitation. Given that the pirates, particularly Captain Hook, who desires revenge for the loss of his hand, constantly target Peter Pan, fighting back makes sense. But because he hates adults, Peter Pan also betrays his own friends. When the Lost Boys begin to mature, he kills them. As Barrie writes in the novel, the boys on the island vary, of course, in numbers, according to how many are killed, and when they appear to be growing up, which is against the rules, Peter thins them out. Because Peter Pan is obsessed with being a child forever, he enjoys everything childhood involves, with one of his favorite pastimes being searching for new games. With nothing to shape his existence, the boy who never grows up is also the boy who never matures at all. Peter Pan is portrayed in the novel as being extremely forgetful. As a result, his memory is slick and feeble, preventing him from learning or adapting as well as humans. In most versions of Barrie's novel, Peter Pan is typically regarded a charming tale of the boy who never grows up and who wouldn't want to be a kid forever. But the story is actually quite dark, not just for the pirates, the Lost Boys, and nearly Wendy, but also for Peter Pan. Being a child forever means he will never fully appreciate what he is missing, living life to the fullest. Instead, he cruelly dominates people around him, even resorting to death when he believes it is necessary to preserve Neverland. Also, the mermaids in Peter Pan did not appear in the original play, The Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up, but were introduced to the Peter Pan mythos in Barrie's novel, Peter and Wendy. In the Disney film, they are portrayed as violent towards Wendy. In fact, Peter is the only creature they will communicate with. The Disney version does not show how they morph at night. The most haunting time to see them is at the turn of the moon, when they utter strange wailing cries. When night falls, the Neverland mermaids transform into sirens, tempting sailors to their deaths in the same way that Peter Pan entices children to visit Neverland. Modern conceptions about sirens and mermaids have grown tangled and muddled. In Greek mythology, sirens were half woman, half bird monsters who lured sailors to their deaths with their beautiful song. Mermaids, on the other hand, are the mythological half-fish, half-woman monsters of the ocean of aquamarine. During the 9th and 10th centuries, art portrayed mermaids as sirens, while avian creatures were also represented as sirens. These inconsistencies persisted for hundreds of years, but by the 14th century, sirens were only depicted as half-fish, half-woman, combining the two mythical animals. These woman-fish hybrids are now referred to as mermaids or sirens, with the former being considered good and the latter as malevolent. Barrie embraced both concepts, having his mermaids morph in the moonlight. Now they're also Aries. A question: does Peter Pan kidnap children? Peter attracts children like Wendy and her brothers to Neverland, much as Hades stole Persephone and transported her to the underworld. This connects us back to Peter Pan's fixation with death. Although Disney's sanitized version of the story portrays Peter Pan as naughty, the original play and book paint Peter as far more malevolent. His fascination with the mermaids who shift into sirens in the moonlight hints that Peter Pan himself may be prone to transformation as well. According to Noel Conder's essay, Peter Pan has a siren-like nature and may be connected to the original sirens of lore who were Persephone's companions in the underworld. This suggests that Peter Pan's connection to the mermaids goes beyond a simple affinity, and that he is linked to the natural world in Neverland, possibly even as the nature god. Conder adds, Peter may have a supernaturally tremendous gift of persuasion. The most compelling animals in the realm of legend are the sirens and their later counterparts, the mermaids. This connection between Peter and the siren-like mermaids also reveals that Peter's motivations for luring the children to Neverland may be darker than we previously thought, given the horrible change the mermaids undergo. Peter also had creepy links with the legend of Pied Piper. The television series Once Upon a Time is based on fairy tales. Season 3 of the sitcom dives into the Peter Pan tale, creating a distinct backstory for Peter as a villain rather than a naughty child who refuses to grow up. This series also makes the implicit relationship between the Pied Piper story and Peter Pan explicit, stating that Pan posed as the Pied Piper in order to take the children in a revenge plan. Peter Pan, like the Greek god Pan and the Pied Piper, is never without his panpipes. Given how Peter basically kidnaps children by luring them to Neverland, he clearly resembles the Pied Piper. Most of us are familiar with the Pied Piper story from the Grimm fairy tales or Robert Browning's poetry. The Pied Piper was hired by the community of Hamelin to solve their rat problem, and he played a magic flute to entice the rats away and drown them. When the hamlet refused to pay him for his services, the Pied Piper fled with their children in the same way. The Disney animated version ends with Peter bringing the children to London, where their parents discover them asleep after arriving home. After returning the children, Peter and his lost boys sail away to Neverland on the Jolly Roger, and Mr. Darling spots the pirate ship in the clouds just before Wendy awakens and informs her parents that she is finally ready to grow up. In the 1911 novel Peter and Wendy, the Darling children return home to London with the lost boys, whom the Darlings adopt. Peter denies adoption, but accepts Mrs. Darling's compromise of allowing Wendy to return to Neverland for a week each year to help with spring cleaning. Peter returns for her a year later, but forgets her the next year. Wendy is married and has her own child by the time Peter returns for her. He is disappointed that Wendy has grown up until he discovers he can take Wendy's daughter Jane to Neverland, and when Jane is older, her daughter Margaret will join him there as well. I hope you enjoyed this video. Do subscribe to my channel Medieval Mind for more videos. Thank you.